Towards the end of my college internship in India, I wanted to travel, and my colleague Deepak recommended accompanying him to his village in Uttar Pradesh, the most populous state of India, to see the real India, as I always described to my fellow Americans. On a woven bed, I awoke to the sound of animals and kind but curious faces. Raised all my life in the suburbs of America, I always felt this need to dig deep into my culture. At first, it was this burden to feel I was making my parents and ancestry proud, that I was in tune with my roots, but then I began to feel epiphanies of my own. Despite my not knowing a lick of Hindi, there was a sense of kinship during my time in India, and Deepak's village was no different. As an only child with my father passing away at a young age and all my relatives in India, I always longed for familial camaraderie, especially male influences, as I sadly didn't have a lot in my own Indian American community growing up. These were the men that became my brothers, and even in the midst of miscommunication and broken English, the love was never lost in translation. One of my friends remarked that my smile never looked bigger than when I was in India. Something about this place always fills a void of belonging that drifts sometimes in the United States. A lot of people say that I was born with the privilege of having both Indian and American culture in my life, but I've always found it to be a delicate balancing act. When I was younger, growing up in Alabama in the early 90s, I didn't have any points of reference for Indian American people like me. There were no Mindy Kalings or Aziz Ansari's. The truth was, I found my Desi culture inconvenient at times, and even inferior to the domineering Western influence. I preferred eating pepperoni pizza over Thayar Sadam. The only Tamil I knew was my young mind sponging up the contextual clues of language as my parents conversed, laughed, and fought in this bilingual mixture. That self-loathing came out when I would travel to India, feeling like I didn't represent my ancestral roots well, that I was disconnected from my cousins with no middle ground. Nowadays, I feel more affinity to the subcontinent than I ever did. In the last 10 years, I have traversed many regions of my ancestral home and found a lot of strength in that 3,000-year-old culture. I have seen the Ganga Arthi at the crack of dawn. I have sat on a shikar with my mom and floated in the rivers of Kashmir. I have drank moonshine with the villagers of Uttar Pradesh. I ate the best chicken tikka masala in a hole-in-the-wall shack with flies everywhere, and to this day, never had anything like it. I've fed the poor on the streets of Varanasi. I have owned the night with the youth of India in the clubs of New Delhi. I met a girl in the mountains of Dharamsala. I waded through the slums of Wazipur in my $300 designer shoes. My mixture of identity is more representative of the gray in a world that isn't black and white. This gumbo of East and West I now relish, this constant rediscovery and appreciation of my vibrant roots, South Indian and the American South, my Indian introspection and American aspirations. I feel my grandparents, father, and ancestral spirits guiding me like my apt initials GPS. Your destination is within yourself. What was once a cultural conundrum is now constant clarity.